Guys, how's it going, and welcome back to the channel. Now today we are going to be talking about the two most popular pets lizards that people choose when trying to choose a best beginner reptile. Of course, these two are going to be the Crested Gecko or the Bearded Dragon. So we're going to be talking a little bit about which one I personally think makes the better beginner reptile, and just be going, side by side on some of the popular categories when trying to choose what reptile is best for you. These are going to be things like enclosure size, heating and lighting, humidity, and then of course diet. And of course right off the bat, you guys already know that I actually think Crested Geckos are going to make the best beginner reptile. I think their care is just a little bit more easier and a little more better with handleability and things like that. I made a whole video about it. I'll put it right here about the best beginner reptile if you guys want to check that out. But still, I want to do a little side-by-side comparison on these two guys and, really drive in why while I think my idea is the best. And to help us out today, we have Xena here, my Tiger Super Dal. Xena's been a resident here at DBCB Exotics for quite a number of years, and she's just gorgeous. I'm going to be showing a lot more animals off in my videos now, and it'll mostly be Crested Geckos when I film in here, but if I've been in the breeding facility, we'll be showing off a couple of other stuff. But Xena's going to be here for right now to show us why I think Crested Geckos do make the best beginner reptile. And real quick before we get this video started, if you guys aren't already subscribed and you love seeing some awesome animals like Xena here, make sure to go to that lower right hand corner and hit that subscribe button. Alright, so how this video is going to work is we'll be going side by side on each of the main topics that I just talked about a little bit. The first one we'll be going with the Crested Gecko, and then we'll be moving and showing what the Bearded Dragon one's going to look like. So with all that said, let's get this video started with topic number one, and that is enclosure size. So when we're talking about enclosure size for a Crested Gecko, I'll be talking a little bit more about the adult enclosures instead of like the juvenile to then adult. We'll be just basing this off of an adult Crested Gecko or an adult Bearded Dragon. So starting out for the adult Crested Gecko, you can actually see it right behind me. You're going to be wanting something pretty much around the size of an 18 by 18 by 24. Right there behind me is the Exoterra. I think those work wonderfully. Anything if you're doing like the bin method instead, something like a 60 quart bin works very well as well. If you're really only having one or two Crested Geckos, I do like the aquariums or the Exoterras a little better. Just looks a little nicer and makes it a little easier getting them around. And to give us a little more information on the Bearded Dragon, here's Dakota with a hat and a coat on. Thanks, Dakota. So we went over the Crested Gecko enclosure size, but now let's get into what that looks like for Bearded Dragons. And here to help me, obviously, we have Toad, one of our Bearded Dragons. This one is the male. We also have my female Rex, however, she's still under brumation, so Toad is going to be taking the spotlight for today. So what does a full adult enclosure size look like for the Bearded Dragon? Well, for a minimum, you're going to be wanting a size that's at least 4 foot long by 2 foot wide by 2 foot height. That's going to be a pretty large enclosure. It's not something that you're going to be able to find at any pet store. It's going to be, of course, custom making one out of just wood or PVC, or getting one from an online source such as Vision or AP Cages. Personally, for me, I went with their 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot option because it was only like $100 more for 2 extra feet, and I went through AP Cages for mine. However, you can also, like I said, build a custom wooden option or anywhere from PVC, making it a custom enclosure. And then here to help me talk about that heating and lighting, we have Spice, one of my grow out Super Dal Crested Geckos. Now, when we're talking about heating for Crested Geckos, it really can't get any more simpler, and that is they pretty much don't need supplemental heating. As long as your house stays around the temperatures of 72 to 78 degrees, there really is no need to provide any supplemental heating for them. Now, as far as lighting goes, you can provide things like 24-hour spectrum lighting, like I have some plant lights here on this one, or even things like UVB, just to help them make sure they're synchronizing that D3 calcium and just providing a better light cycle for them. Now, while providing things like UVB and full spectrum lighting do have their benefits, it's not a requirement, and you can house these guys in simply just an Exoterra with no lighting whatsoever. And that's the main reason on why I think these guys make great beginner reptiles, is you don't need any of that supplemental heating or lighting. It just makes it a lot easier for people, starting out in the hobby, not really understanding how husbandry goes and things of that nature, getting those correct basking temps. Now getting into lighting and heating for the bearded dragon gets a little complicated. So for heating, they are going to be needing a basking spot that's pretty high, anywhere from the 115 to 120 area for the basking temps. They're going to need a couple of basking lights. Personally, I use the PAR 35 floodlights instead of just the regular Reptile basking bulbs because they're a little cheaper and they seem to last a little longer. And then also these guys are a required UVB Reptile, so you are going to be wanting UVB, especially the tube lighting since it's such a large enclosure. I use the ZoomMed 10.0 light that's about 36 inches long for the Reptile for the 6-foot cage, and then for this one I use a 24-inch UVB tube lighting. There's the 10.0 ZoomMed. Like with any UVB bulb, you will be needing to change those tube lightings out at least once every 6 months. Alright, going into topic number 3, we are going to be talking about humidity requirements. Now, this one I do have to give a point for the bearded dragon. The Crested Geckos do have a little bit more of a difficult humidity requirements than they do. As far as Crested Geckos go for humidity requirements, you're going to be wanting it into a range of pretty much 60 to 80%. Now you do want a humidity dip in there as well, so the humidity is not staying at a constant. Some ways to achieve this, of course, are misting a couple times of the day, usually a heavy misting at night and then a light one during the day. This will get that humidity up into the 80% during the night when they are awake and moving around, and keep it a little bit lower when they are sleeping. Now it is something you're going to be wanting to be a little more conscious of and doing daily. You're going to make sure you don't want to be missing these mistings too often because low humidity for Crested Geckos can be detrimental. However, it's a little bit different for bearded dragons, which we'll get into right now. Alright, now let's get into humidity. Now with bearded dragons, humidity is going to be pretty easy, and that is, you don't need to pay much attention to it. Bearded dragons coming for more of an arid region, their humidity requirements are anywhere from 30 to 50%, which is usually the general household humidity is totally fine for them. If anything, you just want to make sure you watch it to make sure it doesn't get too high, but all in all, you really don't need to monitor it that much. I think this is the easiest part of owning a bearded dragon, is the fact with the humidity, it's really not something that needs to be too taken into account, whereas other stuff like any of the New Caledonian geckos, you need to watch it a little more closely. Alright, and then coming down to our last category, which is going to be diet. Now, diet requirements for the bearded dragon and the Crested Gecko do differ quite extensively, and we'll talk about the Crested Gecko one first. Here to help me is one of my little doll babies, still super cute. So, diet for Crested Geckos. This is probably going to be the biggest differing factor between these two guys, and it really votes for the Crested Gecko. I mean, you cannot get any more easier than feeding Crested Geckos than this. So, the main diet for the Crested Gecko is going to be Crested Gecko diet. These are going to be product brands like Reptile and ZoomMed that make complete Crested Gecko diet, which is just a powder substitute that you mix in a little water and feed in a dish. These guys can live strictly off of it as a staple diet. You can offer some insects like crickets, dubia roaches, things like that to help them get a little bit bigger and offer it as like a treat, but it's definitely not a requirement. I mean, these guys have to be the easiest reptile to feed out of all the ones I own. Just mix the powder, put it in, and you're good to go. Now let's get into the bearded dragon diet, which is going to be pretty different. And then lastly, let's get into diet, which it gets a little complicated. So for bearded dragons, the best diet for them is a pretty large variety. You're going to be wanting a variety of not only insects such as dubia roaches, crickets, superworms, phoenix worms, mealworms, things like that, but also an environment of veggies and fruits. Now, the ratio you give for your dragon really depends on how much, if they're an adult or if they're baby, really how old the animal is. But just for adults, you want to feed a little more veggies and greens versus feeding a lot more of crickets to make sure that your dragon stays at a nice weight. So all in all, I just want to wrap this part up by saying, although I don't think the bearded dragon is the best beginner lizard as a first-time reptile owner, I do think they make amazing lizards, and if you're willing to play the part in the extra husbandry and care that they're going to be needing, they do make wonderful pets. This guy just right here just lays on the hand. Of course, he's going to move right when I say that, but they're really just nice, docile animals. I've never been bitten by any of mine, and bearded dragons are my first reptiles, so they always have a place in my heart. Although Toad I've only known for a couple years, of course I've had Rex for 5, bearded dragons played a key role in how I got into the reptile hobby, and I couldn't be to where I am now without them. I'll summarize the Crested Gecko part with, if you're looking for an animal that makes a perfect first-time beginner pet where you don't really need to worry too much on the husbandry and care and making sure that everything is top-notch, because really when you're thinking about the Crested Gecko, it could not get any simpler, then I think the Crested Gecko would be right for you. Although not very big in size, they do make great little pets. I've had Almo here, he was actually the second reptile that I've ever owned in my first Crested Gecko, and I've had him for years, and it's been such a blast just watching him move around and handling him. You know, although they're not as big as the bearded dragon and, you know, not as cool to show off to your friends, I think the Crested Geckos are still a very cool species. And that's pretty much gonna wrap up the video for today. So let me know what you think. Do you think the Crested Gecko makes the better pet or the bearded dragon? Leave me a comment in the comment section below. As always, if you liked the video, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of my animals or breeding products, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Where you going, bud? At DVCV Exotics, and other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day. He's going.